Welcome into the Go Vols 24/7 podcast. I am Ben McKee, and I am joined by Patrick Brown on this Tuesday, January 20th edition of the podcast. Tennessee has a strength coach, Mr. Brown. Not only does it have a strength coach, it has a national championship winning strength coach.
Yes, Ben. Derek Owings is, I think he flew straight from Miami on Monday night. On Tuesday morning to be in Knoxville and meet his new team and get started. Workouts will start on Wednesday morning, and Tennessee hired a national champion defensive coordinator back in December with Jim Knowles, and now they get a national champion strength coach in Derek Owings. And it's a big move, Ben. I think that's how it has to be looked at. I mean, this is a guy in Owings that had been with Curt Cignetti from his first season at James Madison, and I think their record over the past 6 seasons was 64-9, which was pretty dang good. So this is a guy that behind the scenes has been very important to what Cignetti has done. I mean, you even go back to James Madison. They were in, they made the FCS to FBS transition look really easy because they went to 2, I think, FCS semifinals. Those their final 2 seasons at that level, and then jumped right into the Sun Belt and won 2 division titles. And certainly, A, continued to win after Curt Cignetti went to Indiana, and B, a bunch of those players went from that program to Indiana and helped them go 27-2 over the past 2 seasons, 16-0. So this guy is he has been very successful. He's been courted. USC went after him last season, and Indiana gave him almost doubled his salary up to, I think, $900,000. And Tennessee has locked him up on a 3-year deal at $1.2 million a year, which makes him I believe the highest paid strength coach in the country, if not ever, in college football. So the latest salary numbers for that position are only, I think, up to date via the USA Today database from December 2024. But I think what's interesting to me, Ben, is that he signed the deal a week ago. He signed the deal on January 13th. Owings did. So this was always the plan, was to finish out the season with Indiana. It went all the way to the national championship game on Monday night in Miami, and all the way to the final minute of that game. But he's on a plane, or was on a plane Tuesday morning, and will be ready to start workouts with Tennessee. And this is a big swing. This is something that we talked about several times in this podcast, even going back to the end of the season, about changes that Tennessee needed to make this offseason. Certainly a defensive coordinator, that was one that's been done. And some of those ensuing changes have been made as well. And now this one with the strength coach. And Owings worked with Josh Heupel at UCF. So I think that's what I like about this. And this is how it's a little bit different from what, from hiring Jim Knowles, is because Josh Heupel never worked with Jim Knowles before. In this case, he's making a statement hire, but he's hiring somebody he knows and has seen work before in his program. So a big move. And I think Tennessee probably, and Josh Heupel probably doesn't, decide not to renew Kurt Schmidt, the only strength coach he's had as a head coach, unless he knew he had a pretty good shot at getting Derek Owings from Indiana. So it's hard not to see what Indiana is doing and not want to replicate it. And it may be harder to keep 23 and 24-year-old players on your roster, but if you can get the strength coach and the guy that took all these lowly rated recruits or transfer guys, however you want to describe Indiana, if you want to take the guy that developed a lot of those guys into the stars that we've seen this season, then that's the direction to go, and that's what Tennessee's done.
Yeah, this was target number 1 for Josh Heupel the moment he needed a strength coach. Derek Owings was, and you make a great point that Heupel probably does not decide to part ways with Kurt Schmidt if he doesn't understand that Owings is a legitimate option for him. And then there were a couple of other names that made sense as well that you heard through back channels. The Miami strength coach, who was, if I'm not mistaken, was here from Knoxville.
He was on the strength staff in 2024, and he is also, I think, he played at the University of the Cumberlands, which I think is just on the other side of the Tennessee-Kentucky border, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. You pass it as you are driving north to Lexington. I always stop, and I don't literally stop, but as I'm driving by up the mountain, I look at their facilities that you can see from the highway. But that would have been a great option too, given how physical of a football team Miami is. And then Corey Miller felt kind of always like the backup plan. Former Tennessee defensive lineman Corey Miller, who was at Tennessee in a capacity part of the strength staff at one point, has kind of bounced around. I believe spent time at Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin at some point, and maybe even FAU before that. But most recently is currently the strength coach out at UCLA, which is ironic given the Nico situation and Joey Aguilar situation now in hindsight. So Tennessee had several good options, it seems, is my point. But it seems like, without a doubt, Owings was number one on the board from the jump. Hype was able to land him, and it's as good of a hire as Josh Heupel could have made. And not only is it as good of a hire as he could have made, I mean, it's a home run hire. I really think it is because of the importance of that position. And how could you not say that you're not getting the best of the best, given he's a national champion? He's at the mountaintop. The best of the best each year is defined, I think, by the national champion, and that is that. And Tennessee needed to do two things with this hire. It obviously needed to become a more physical football team. You check that box, and then just as important, you needed to become a more disciplined football team. And not that it will only be Owens' responsibility, because Josh Heupel works hand in hand. He's just as responsible for it as the strength coach is. He sets the temperament for the program. He instructs the strength coach what he wants of his football team. But Tennessee needed to become more physical, and they needed to become more disciplined. And who exemplified discipline and physicality better than Indiana this season?
Yeah, I mean, they were a remarkable story. I mean, just a football afterthought going from that to the mountaintop in 2 years. I mean, they were 3-9, and I think won one Big Ten game that in 2023 before Signetti got there, and then they make the college football playoff last season. It was kind of a cute story, I guess. They didn't really play anybody. The only team they played beat them pretty good. They get to the playoff, and they play Notre Dame. Notre Dame beats them pretty good, but I mean, this season they were a machine. I think they won 10 of their 12 regular season games by double digits. They went and won some tough road games in the Big Ten at Iowa and Oregon and Penn State. And then you look at the run they went on in the postseason. They beat the quote unquote more talented teams, right? They beat Ohio State to win the Big Ten. They beat Alabama badly in the Rose Bowl. Oregon again in a blowout, and then Miami, who had certainly, as you touched on with Irvin Young, sort of set its own physicality and playing style apart. So, and to your point, I mean, I think they were top 5 in the country in scoring offense, top 5 in the country in scoring defense. Their run defense allowed like 77 yards per game. They held all of those postseason, in all those postseason games, they held those teams to under 100 rushing yards. So, just a physical, hard hitting brand of football. But you also touched on the discipline too, particularly looking at Indiana's defense. It seemed like they never really beat themselves. Very fundamentally sound, executing. And to your point about discipline, again, they were, I think, the least penalized team in the country, or at least the least penalized team in the Power Four, and that's certainly been a sore area for Tennessee. And I put this quote in one of the stories that I wrote on Owings on Tuesday morning from Signetti back almost 2 years ago, I suppose, when he was talking about bringing him on from James Madison. He said that he's on the cutting edge, gets great results. I have 100% confidence in him. I don't mess with him. That's his area. I let him go. And so certainly, as you touched on, there will be some input from the head coach. But if you're bringing this guy in at $1.2 million a year, and you've seen his process and you've seen his results, I think you say, hey, go do what you do. Bring on who you want to bring on. I think he's going to bring a couple of guys from Indiana with him. From that staff, because a lot of these programs now, there's sort of a mini staff with the strength and conditioning department, because you need other guys in those areas to help you, or at least help the main guy. So you hire him and you let him take this football team this offseason starting this week, and you say, hey, do what you did, get guys bigger, get guys stronger, faster, develop that mindset, that toughness, because we touched on this too. Indiana was blowing everybody out, but then they got really pushed on Monday night by Miami, and they had to respond. And they had, you've seen their physical toughness all season, and then you had to see their mental toughness in those key moments in that game too. So if you could get him to replicate even 85% of that with your team, I think Tennessee is going to like the results, because that's areas that you need to take a step in. And certainly you hope, if you're Tennessee, that Owings can do that, and you got to give him the time to over these next few months to make that happen.
Tennessee baseball does not win a national championship without Quentin Eberhardt. Tennessee basketball does not have the success it has had under Rick
Yep.
Barnes, without Garrett Medenwald, and I know people know that. My point in bringing that up is that we don't, for how important that role is and that person is to your program, we don't talk about them enough. That's kind of why
Hmm.
I mentioned Q and Garrett Medenwald, aka G, two of the absolute best in their sports. And now Tennessee is hiring, like I said earlier, the one that you can argue is the best in the business right now, given what his team did this past season. So, such a critical hire for Josh Heupel. Again, I don't think he could have made a better hire. Target number one from the jump. They're able to make it happen, and I think also, Patrick, my final thought is that you have to give Danny White, Donnie Plowman, and the administration a tip of the hat as well, because they were more than willing to commit the resources necessary, and they have the resources at a place like Tennessee to do this. Don't let anybody fool you into thinking that they don't. At Tennessee, you can take care of everybody and prioritize what needs to be prioritized, because there's plenty of money, as Danny White pointed out last week in an
300
interview with
million in
Mike
revenue last
Signal.
fiscal year. Yeah.
That's right. So, but you still give them credit for still stepping up and making sure that they were able to lock this down.
Yeah. And supporting your football coach too, right? I mean, Danny was on, I think, the McKee show last week and was kind of giving his thoughts on the football season as a whole, and said, "Hey, you start out with this list of goals," and he kind of named off some of them. National championship, SEC championship. If you can't do that, at least win a bowl game. And you're like, as you listen all these off, you're like, Tennessee didn't do any of those. So, you could either. So that season probably didn't sit well with him either, and so he's going to give his guy that he hired, the resources that he needs to go out there and hire the people. And I think we kind of heard that some during the broadcast of the championship game on Monday night, is that Indiana may not have gotten the flashiest guys or the guys with most stars, but they got the right players, right? They may not have been the biggest spenders. Now everybody spends money these days. I guess the playing field has never been more level because everyone can spend money in college football, but you need to hire the right guys. And so you give Josh Heupel the ammunition that he needs to go and overhaul, make a couple of big changes that he needed to make with his program. So I think it shows a lot of support for the head coach and the direction that the program's going from the administration, and that's something that Tennessee maybe hasn't always had in terms of that alignment in some of those key positions, those key leadership positions. So it's good to see that continuing, and kind of looking back on it. I know, I kind of think back to our discussions right at the end of the season after the Vanderbilt debacle, and it's like, okay, Tennessee needed to make two. If you were putting a list of a to-do list together of what Tennessee needed to do to changes that needed to be made, I mean, they've done them, right? And then you go and hire a couple of national champions for your new defensive coordinator and your strength coach. I think you have to commend the work that Josh Heupel's done, and now he's kind of got to let those guys do what they do. Let them work this offseason and start building this team towards next fall.
We'll end this first segment by putting a bow on the offseason, and it's a bit of a premature question, and it honestly deserves its own podcast. But what is your grade for the Tennessee offseason in terms of what it needed to accomplish in terms of making hires and addition to the roster? Obviously, the offseason is not over, but the vast majority of the hay is in the barn. All of the big things that needed to get done: hire a defensive coordinator, hire a strength coach, turn over the personnel on defense, find a quarterback. Like all of those things, those boxes have been checked, and we'll get a bit more in depth on the quarterback situation on the other side of our timeout. But up to this point, what grade would you give them with what they have accomplished? Because again, not over. They still need to go do some small things here and there, like add a defensive tackle or little things like that. But the big things are done. So again, this deserves more of a entire podcast for it. But just your initial thoughts as the hay does come into the barn on the grade that you would give Tennessee for what it has done here in January.
Well, can I break it down? Can I go strength coach is an A+?
Yeah, there's no doubt that that's a strength that's an A+. And sure, you can break it down individually if you'd like, but I would like an overall grade when it's all said and done. I'm putting you on.
I'm not gonna,
I'm throwing you a fastball here. up and in
I'm
to see
not
if you can turn on it.
I'm not going every individual player and coach, but just some of the defensive changes. I'll lump all those in together. I'd probably give that an A. I think Jim Knowles is his track record speaks for itself. He's put pretty good units on the field everywhere he's been. Obviously he won a national title at Ohio State, and it would be easy to say, well, he can only work with elite talent. I don't think that's the case because look what he did at Duke. David Cutcliffe won a lot of games at that program that at that point hadn't won a lot of games. And then he takes Oklahoma State, who had been, in the offense first Big 12, and they were top 10 in scoring defense and total defense in 2021. Now, it took a few years to build that up and get to that point. Certainly at those jobs, that was a different era of college football compared to what it is now. But I think getting Anthony Poindexter, I think, is probably one of the best safeties coaches in the game. You pair him, you've got Rodney Garner, who's one of the best defensive line coaches in the game. Some of those other hires are maybe a little bit more young, up and coming guys, but Jim Knowles has connections with them. So, and Andrew Jackson and Michael Hunter Jr. So, I probably give that group an A. So strength coach A plus, defensive staff an A. I'd probably go B on the portal. I think they've certainly addressed some needs, particularly on defense. I still feel like they're a little bit short at defensive tackle, as you touched on. And then the quarterback situation, we can talk about that, I guess, in the next segment or have its own podcast on that. But certainly it's just sort of interesting that the plans appear to be, okay, swing really big at Brendan Sorsby, swing really big at Sam Levitt, hold out hope for Ty Simpson and see what he does. You're kind of holding out hope for Joey Aguilar. And that still could, I guess that situation is still out there. He's got a hearing scheduled for a preliminary injunction on February 10th. So I guess that door is still not entirely closed and locked. But then you go from those situations and then you bring in Ryan Staub from Colorado, who was part of sort of a 3-man rotation. I don't even know if it was a rotation. It was kind of all over the place at times in Boulder. Probably why they went 3-9 this season. But you bring him in and that move tells me that you're turning things over to your young talent, which is not a bad move. It's just, that's an unknown. And so we'll have to see how that plays out. But, and if everything seems to be in place, and now you have this sort of big, I don't say mystery, because they know who they've recruited, right? They know George McIntyre and Faison Brandon, they've invested a lot of time and resources in getting those guys here. But it's, they seem to have all these things in place, and then they're turn it over to a redshirt freshman quarterback in a sport where all the teams that were playing later than everyone else had veteran transfer guys. So I'd give the portal a B. I think a lot of the additions they made since the dead period have been more kind of rounding out depth and things like that. But I do think they added some key pieces, particularly on defense. I mean, you kind of rebuilt your secondary there. You get Amari Campbell in, not even knowing that you were going to get Arion Carter back. That's a situation we can touch on in the next segment as well, probably. But I'd give the portal a B. I think Tennessee did a solid job of addressing needs and getting some depth in some key spots, and also getting some starters because that's what they needed, particularly on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, I'd go just overall so far here on January 20th. I'd go B plus, maybe an A minus. I lean A minus because of the Jim Knowles and
I lean
Owings.
A minus because of Arion, honestly.
Because of Arion, that's an interesting. I like Arion. I think the biggest moves that they made was with the staff. I think that those were the most impressive things that took place. Because those were the most needed changes, I think, and you made those changes by certainly hitting a home run with your new strength coach, and then I think hitting a home run with Jim Knowles. So that's why I lean A minus, but to bring it back down to a B plus is because I think they were a little slow out of the gates with the portal. I would
agree.
There weren't enough. We're kind of finishing second, and they're at the very beginning of the portal, and I think that was a result of not being as aggressive as you could have been throughout December to make sure that you were geared up and ready to go for the portal, and then just the quarterback situation has been a little wonky as well, and I like the players that they've added, but I don't know if the portal haul is good enough to match up talent-wise with what Texas has, with what LSU has, like the premier rosters in your league that you have to beat in order to make the playoffs. I like the roster. I don't know if I like it equal to or more than the rosters that you're going to have to overcome to get back into the playoffs. So that's where I'm kind of at the why I would bring it back down to a B. But overall, a really strong offseason so far for Tennessee in terms of changes. Now it's going to be important that they go out these next couple of months. And I'm stating the obvious here, but put in a lot of great work their tails off, and really take the next step from a developmental standpoint in a lot of different areas. So that will be key here coming up. And as you mentioned, Patrick, there are several other things that have happened in addition to Tennessee hiring a new strength coach since we last spoke. And we've got to talk Arion Carter. We've got to talk about Tennessee's new quarterback, Tennessee's search for a tight end. That happened since the last time we recorded a podcast.
Quick one. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. I don't believe Jack Van Dorselaer was in the portal the last time we recorded. So we saw a tight end leave. We saw one come in. Desan Brame was receiving phone calls, and he's still in at Tennessee. So still plenty more to discuss about Tennessee football and its offseason, and we will do so on the other side of this quick timeout. Welcome back into the Go Vols 24/7 podcast. I am Ben McKee, and I'm joined by Patrick Brown on this Tuesday, January 20th edition of the podcast. Before we continue our conversation, I do need to encourage you, wherever you find our podcast, which should be on every streaming platform there is, if you wouldn't mind going in and leaving us a review, giving us a like if you would be inclined to do so. That helps us in a major way, and we would greatly appreciate that. And of course, if there's a Tennessee fan out there who hasn't quite found us yet, but they're looking for more Tennessee football conversation and looking to get caught up on all the off-season happenings, please send us their way. We would greatly appreciate that as well. I was going to start off with the quarterback because it's the quarterback position, but you made a very interesting comment there at the end of that first segment about Arion Carter and how you think that was, if I heard you correctly, please correct me if I'm misquoting you, but how you think that was the biggest move of the offseason so far, or something along those lines. So why is that?
It bumped it from a B+, which is where I was at, to an A-.
I got you.
And that was a unique situation, at least in terms of my history covering this football program. I've seen some things and some stuff since 2011 covering the Vols. This was a little different, though. A guy withdrawing from the draft and then apparently going to the portal because Arion announces he's turning pro. I think it was December 12th. And after that, it was like, okay, he's an afterthought. Like he's going and taking the next step since he's already in off-season mode, getting ready for 26. They bring in Murray Campbell, who's a Jim Knowles guy. He was his Mike linebacker at Penn State, came in after spring ball, ace, learning a tough defense, and had 103 tackles and other supporting stats to show that he wasn't just tackling guys 5 yards downfield. And then, Arion's on the official early entry list that the NFL sends out. I even checked it on Wednesday, I think was the deadline last week. And you got to just check it just to make sure that, because, James Pierce Jr. last year almost missed the deadline. Funny story there. But I guess he maybe didn't know how to fill it all out and make sure everything was crossed and everything. But you kind of check, you see he's on there with Jamal McCoy and Colton Hood. Chris Brazel's on the list of other guys with Ty Simpson. Ironically enough, who you're checking as well, just to make sure as those were guys that had graduated, right? They're kind of separate from the underclassmen that haven't graduated yet. But there's a little known 72-hour window where players can withdraw. And I guess Arion got follow-up medical information. I guess maybe he had double turf toe during the season, probably wanted to get it checked after a few weeks of being off his feet and not playing. Finds out that it's still not great, still is probably going to, it was bad enough that he was not going to be able to do any of the pre-draft stuff. So he's like, okay, I got to come back to college football because if you can't do the combine, can't do pro day, that's going to hurt your stock. And so his first move is to go to the portal. And that happened Friday night, right, Ben? That he's going to go in the portal, and kind of goes back and forth. Like he's leaving and he's not leaving. I think Saturday night it was not going to happen, and then Sunday you start hearing that it's working its way back towards happening. And I think ultimately, I don't think Josh Heupel in Tennessee wanted to see him playing somewhere else. I mean, this is a guy that's from Smyrna. He's an in-state guy. He chose Tennessee over Alabama. He's been a well-respected leader and influence in the locker room for most of his career. He's been a pretty good player when he's been healthy. Led your team in tackles the past 2 seasons, and so I don't think Tennessee wanted to see him play somewhere else. I don't know if it was just because it's Arion or I don't know if there was another whatever the reason was. Tennessee did not want to see him playing against them potentially as well. We should mention that, and so Tennessee tries to make it work. There's some back and forth there, and I think ultimately Tennessee didn't want to see him play anywhere else, and Arion didn't want to really, he needed some things met to return to Tennessee, but I think that interest was on his side as well. So they made it work, got the financials and some of that stuff ironed out, and he's back. So I just think you add him to that linebacker room, which is already looking pretty strong on paper. Bringing in Amari Campbell, a 2-year starter that's played a lot of football. You have Jeremiah Thielander, a 2-year starter that's played a lot of football. You have Edwin Spillman coming off a big redshirt freshman season. Jim Knowles has recruited him at Ohio State, likes him a lot. That room looks really strong, and as I kind of wrote in something I posted on Monday, that's going to be important because this is a transition on defense, right? You got a lot of new pieces on the defensive line, or at least maybe not new pieces, but you're breaking in some new guys there because you lost 7 of your top 10 in that rotation, and then your secondary is going to have a whole bunch of new starters. They've added 7 or 8 defensive backs in the portal, some plug and play guys. So that linebacker room that's got continuity on the field with who's been there. And I guess with William Inge being back too, you've got continuity there. That's going to be, I think, important because you've got leaders in Carter and Thielander and even Spillman who this offseason can, give guys a kick in the butt during those morning offseason workouts. Say, hey,
and it already seems like Campbell's going to be a leader for them as well.
Right. And he's that way too. You've got guys that have been like, hey, remember what Vanderbilt did to us? Like, we got to work extra hard. You've got those guys in the locker room and in the weight room and on the indoor field pushing you that way for the next several months. And you've got Campbell, who's sort of the inside guy on knowing this defense because he can relate. Okay, how do you learn this? How did he learn this defense? I just picture him jumping into those late night linebacker meetings with some of those guys that have been kind of referred to as film junkies, guys like Thielander, Carter, Spillman, and they've taken some of those younger guys who have stuck around, Perlotti, Jaden Harmon. Some of those guys, they've added Braden Rouse and TJ White, who were 2 blue chip guys too. And so you add all those guys together, and I think that's the best of both worlds because you're going to have somebody that's going to be able to lead not only that group, but the entire defense through the offseason. You're going to have a guy that's in Campbell that is going to lead you through learning the process of a new defense that's pretty, from what we've heard, it has its complexity. So I just think that's a huge deal. If any reason, it's because you're not playing against him. I think that might have been tough for some Tennessee fans to see a guy like Arion, a native son who, is, just go watch his pregame speech before the Florida game. That would be my advice, just to see how much he cares about this program. And you didn't want to see that guy wearing whatever other uniform. It's kind of like when Freddie Freeman left the Braves. It was like, go anywhere but the Dodgers. Like if Arion went somewhere that Tennessee wasn't playing or somewhere out of the SEC, you're probably okay with it. But if as a Tennessee fan, you see him go to an SEC rival or somebody you're playing like a lot of these guys have, you feel a little bit different about it. So I think getting him back is really important. It gives Jim Knowles some options with that linebacker group because you can play 3 guys. You could rotate. They've had injuries at that position over the past 2 seasons. If you go back to Keenan Peely and then Arion Carter being, kind of limited at parts last season. So you got depth there. You maybe got some, what do they do with Jaden Perlotti? Can they find some sort of hybrid role for him? Can they find, can they make these guys a rush in? Your defensive line's not the deepest. So they've got sort of an offseason to figure that out. But I just think that's a situation where you already had a pretty good lineup and now you add him there and it makes it even better. And you've just got a really good group of players, and you're just going to let them sort of figure out amongst themselves over the next several months.
You also went back and watched some film on Ryan Staub, Tennessee's new quarterback. What do you make of that addition? I don't know that it's one that personally changes the outlook of the room. I would personally, and it's January 20th, a lot of offseason to go. and it's a critical offseason for George McIntyre. I'm not saying that Faison Brandon is not capable of winning the job, because I think he is capable of winning the job, but I think we all agree that McIntyre has a leg up because he's been here for a year. So not to just go ahead and give him the job, but I would think that even with the addition of Ryan Staub, I would project personally that George McIntyre wins the job, just because I don't know that Staub is an electric addition or anything along those lines. I think this fits in the tier of, okay, they went after the tier of quarterbacks with the Sam Levitt types who could, when you sign him, he's your starting quarterback. To me, this is in the tier of, this is another body in the room, because we need a body. We need a third body with two young guys in the room. And Jason Swain made a great point during Tuesday's Swain event, is like Brent Schaefer and Eric Ainge were able to have success as true freshmen in, what was that, 2004? But
Yeah.
neither one of them, despite both being very talented, both dealt with injuries throughout the course of the season, because they had not been in a strength and conditioning program at the college level.
So you're saying he's their Rick? He is this team's Rick Clausen, is what you're saying? Is that what he was saying?
Yeah. Oh, and that's not at all what Swain was saying, but maybe that is what I'm trying to say. Although I think I don't want to. I think Rick Clausen might prove to be a bit better. But I guess to summarize me yapping, Ryan Staub does not move the needle in terms of, like, I guess, Tennessee upgrading that position. But I'm curious as to your thoughts as somebody who did go back and watch some of the action when he did play this season.
Yeah, I'll start with Staub himself. He was sort of the third guy there in that quarterback room with Caden Salter, who had a great run at Liberty and then goes out there to Colorado. Then they add Julian Lewis, who was a 5-star can't miss guy. I think he reclassified though. So, watching some of the Colorado games that I watched on YouTube, he was out there and he looked like a skinny freshman that it was kind of like, oh, okay, that's what a skinny freshman looks like actually on the field. And so he kind of came off the bench. They were kind of scuffling a little bit against Delaware in like the second week, and they put him in, and he leads 2 touchdown drives, hit a long touchdown over the top in that game, and sort of sparked them to a blowout there. And then he started against Houston, where that game kind of got away from him. He's got the ability to push the ball down the field a little bit. I think he was 413. I'm doing this all off the top of my head. I did an X's and O's feature. Go check it out on the site. I think he was like 413 on passes 20 yards downfield. So he's got the ability a little bit to stretch the field. You see him sort of doing some good quarterback things where he's manipulating defenders with his eyes. He's able to, read a blitz and get the ball out quick to where it needs to go. He had a run against Houston where he scrambled and took off from like the 25 and got down to the end zone. And I would say he pulled off a homeless man's Mendoza trying to dive for the end zone. I think he got hit right before he broke the plane. I think his head broke the plane, but the ball didn't. He actually ended up fumbling his helicopter around. They recovered it for a touchdown. But kind of play that if your quarterback does that, that'll galvanize your team. So he's got the ability to move around. I think he had another play in that game where he kind of did a kind of Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes kind of backhand flip on the run that was kind of a little audacious. So he's got a little bit of moxie to him, and he can do some good things. I think he's, again, if I was making a depth chart here on January 20th, I'd probably go George McIntyre 1, Faison 2, and then he'd be the third sort of emergency guy. I would equate it to an NFL team signing that journeyman veteran, even though Ryan Staub doesn't necessarily have a bunch of pass attempts or starts. I think he only started 2 games in 3 seasons at Colorado. I think he only attempted about 98 passes. I think it was less than 100 this season. So he's not a guy with a ton of experience, but he's been in the program. Seems like he's going to know what he's brought here to do. Maybe mentor some of those young guys, help them be a good program guy, and just be ready if you need it. So I think he gives them just a security blanket. Like I said, I don't think, and you kind of touched on this too, I don't think this is going to deter Tennessee. Once they move past some of those big name guys, I think they said, okay, we're going to go with the young talent we've acquired. And so this is not going to, I think, disrupt that approach. but it just gives them a little bit of security, right? It gives them an extra arm, a guy that's played a little bit, that can do some good things. That if you really got in a pinch, and if we're down to your third quarterback at the end of a season or any point in the season, your season's probably not going to go great anyway. But he sort of solves a need and fits a need there in that room. And but yeah, so I think that was actually probably a good. You touched on what Swain brought up about that 2004 team. That's probably a good sort of comparison, because I think he again is sort of that NFL journeyman guy, not necessarily Phillip Rivers per se. I should point that out because Josh Heupel made that joke when he was talking about getting a third quarterback back in December. And certainly he's not one that's going to change what they obviously had moved to do, but he's just that sort of veteran guy that gives you some security and gives you an extra arm in there for practices. And if you got down into a pinch and needed him, I think you could do a lot worse, right? I think he's probably an upgrade on Jake Merklinger if that's the replacement, if that's how you're comparing him to, right? If you can't really, Joey's situation is sort of separate. He was out of eligibility until he's not. And then you're replacing the guy that just left, which was Merklinger. I would say he's an upgrade in that standpoint, but he's not going to. I think this is you're still going to get your George McIntyre phase-on competition that even months out you could say was probably coming. Although obviously a lot of things happened in that quarterback room over the past 12 months.
Yeah, nobody saw Nico on January 20th last year leaving before the spring game, so who knows what may happen. I'm kidding. I'm not trying to trigger anybody's battered Vol fan syndrome. I'm excited to see what George and Faison do with the opportunity. Would I prefer, if I was a GM or constructing a roster, to have a more experienced quarterback? Absolutely. But both of those guys have a ton of talent, and I'm very excited to learn and see how they handle spring practice, what we hear about how they are progressing and what they look like, how their bodies transform over the summer. I had somebody who saw Faison when he arrived on campus that was pleasantly surprised by Faison's size and where it was already at. Not that he was already not that he's Tim Tebow or Cam Newton or somebody like that, but that he's like a really solid, was he 6'3.5", 6'4", 200 pounds. Like he already looks good physically, and that's before he lifts a single college weight.
Yeah, I remember being kind of tall and kind of long. There was a recruiting camp they had, a summer camp a few years ago, where they had him, George. I think this was going into George's senior season, and Jared Curtis was there too. Might have been another guy who was in that 24 class that I think he might have gone to Arkansas. Anyways, and I thought that day that Faison looked the best of all of them. That was obviously several years ago, and a lot has changed since then. But I think Faison is very talented, and it shouldn't be counted out by any stretch. And I had some questions on the checkerboard last week about him potentially redshirt, and I'm like, I don't think he can carry that mindset. I think he came here to compete, and now that the situation has sort of played out like it has, if you'd gotten a Sam Levitt or if Ty Simpson had not gone to the draft and you were able to pull that off, okay, maybe he's thinking redshirt, but now I don't think that can be the case. And so I think he and George are going to attack this offseason and push each other and sort of like the linebacker situation. Tennessee's going to let it play out and let the chips fall where they may.
I also don't think that redshirting for a guy like that is as important. Maybe not important, because it is important. It just doesn't matter anymore for a guy like that, because the way I look at it is very simple. Same way we looked at it with Nico. If all goes well, Faison is here for 3 years and he goes to the NFL draft, whether he redshirts or not. Just like Nico, he redshirted that year behind Joe Milton, but if things had worked out, he was going to leave for the NFL theoretically after 3 years. And on the flip side of that, if Faison is here longer than 3 years, something probably went wrong. Like, either way you slice it, Faison's probably not going to be here for enough years to where that redshirt year is truly going to matter. So, like, would it be cool if he had that redshirt? Like, okay, sure, maybe, but just given the level of talent that guy has, he's either going to the NFL in 3 years or he's going somewhere else because things didn't work out at Tennessee. I mean, I think it's that simple, quite frankly. They'll have,
and to
Go
kind
ahead.
of kind of yeah, I mean, and they're thinking about changing the redshirt rule to like 9 games, so it's better anyway. I
And
mean, so
it may reach a point to where it's just guys have
everybody, 5
5
years,
years.
yeah.
So, but when you get a talent like Faison and Tristan Keys, guys like that, like they're not supposed to be here longer than 3 years. If things either went the exact way that they're supposed to, or something happened along the way that wasn't supposed to. And maybe that's injuries or something like that. You never know. But
And you're
um,
also paying them a lot of money not to play. And our quarterback's
right,
a little bit different, right? There's only one of them. It's different than if you're,
yeah,
that's kind of why we all thought, David Sanders was going to be a day one starter. It's like, yeah, he's good enough to, if he has a good offseason. He had a great offseason, actually. But it's also like you've invested a lot of money in him, and they have in the past maybe not done a great job of playing the young guys that they've invested in, right? If you're going to go about it that way and build your roster and your program that way, you gotta play these guys early. Now that's sort of zigging while Indiana zags and has a team full of 23-year-olds. But if that's your approach, that's what you gotta lean into it. But kind of going back to that like analogy with Staub, if he's the free agent veteran that you signed this offseason, it's almost like Tennessee had 2 first-round draft picks and went back-to-back quarterback, which no NFL team would probably ever do. I guess the only comparable situation would be like the Falcons giving Kirk Cousins a boatload of money and then drafting Michael Penix in the top 10. Um, but in that situation, you would have drafted 2 top 10 quarterbacks, and back to back years. But that's you. I hate to bring up a Jeremy Pruitt line, but he once said that like you got to keep getting quarterbacks until you got one. And so he obviously, it's ironic that he said that given his quarterback record at Tennessee, um, but yeah, I mean, if you have a chance to get a George McIntyre, then you have a chance to get a Faison Brandon, and you pull it off, great. And like I said, you kind of get them here and see which one's better. But like you said, if George takes off and wins the job and has a great season, Faison's probably not going to be here this time next year because somebody will throw a lot of money at him to go start, and he probably will say, "Hey, I can go start somewhere." Or if Faison wins the job or gets the chance and takes off and runs with it, he's your quarterback for the next two years. So after next season, so to your point, you're right on because that's probably how it's going to play out one way or the other.
and I'll put a bow on our quarterback conversation with an optimistic view on Ryan Staub, a glass half full approach, because I guess I did downplay the addition. And in terms of his ability, Josh Heupel, he knows a thing or two about quarterback play. So, do I have high expectations for Ryan Staub this year? No. But maybe I should reevaluate that, not in terms of necessarily the expectations, but maybe his potential because of what Josh Heupel has done with Hendon Hooker was unproven when he got to Tennessee. Joe Milton was unproven. Joey Aguilar unproven at this level. Now, even though those guys weren't fully proven, they had done more, especially in Hendon's case, had done more at Virginia Tech that even Ryan Staub has at Colorado. There's just not a huge sample size with Ryan Staub. There are bigger sample sizes with those other guys. But my point is that although I personally don't have high expectations for his ability, Josh Heupel knows a thing or two about quarterbacks and certainly knows more about that position than I do. And as we have talked about here on the podcast, Wayne and I have talked about it on our show. You give Heupel the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that position right now. So I may not have high expectations today, but maybe I look silly for that here in a couple months.
I would agree. I would say taking a Virginia Tech retread and a Michigan retread and doing what he that's what I was thinking when people, and including our Go Vols 24/7 work text thread, when they were kind of looking at Bo Perbula from Missouri. Not the most amazing results
Right.
there, but like again, at that point, I was like, okay, if they bring him in and start him, who's to say that they can't work something out of that because of what, like you said, what he did with Hendon, what he did with Joe. In Joey's case, he had put up a lot of numbers but it was at Appalachian State in the Sun Belt. So, but he had thrown for almost 7,000 yards and over 50 touchdowns. So that's what I was thinking. I was thinking along those lines with Perbula, not so much with Staub, just because he doesn't have just the experience. He's never really been a starter. He's just kind of been a guy in that room, right? He was the backup to Shador his first 2 seasons, I guess, and then was in there with Salter and with Lewis this past season. So that's kind of always been what he is. So to your point, yeah, I don't really have high expectations for him. I mean, I think he's a guy that probably raises your floor of that room a little bit, if anything. But the ceiling of that room is going to be determined by how those 2 young guys go about it this offseason, how they play next fall. And they are coming in, they will be stepping into a mostly returning offense, right? I mean, you feel good about that. You're not plugging that young quarterback, whoever it is, into an offense like this season where you had a lot of guys stepping into new spots, right? You've got a lot of offensive line coming back. You've got Braylon Staley and Mike Matthews. You've got Ethan Davis and Deshaun Brame. You've got Deshaun Bishop with Dwan Morris and then Tulane transfer Javen Gordon. So that quarterback, whoever it is stepping into a decent situation, I would say, with what Tennessee's bringing back on offense next season.
Yeah, a really strong situation with your pass catchers for sure. At receiver, most definitely. I mean, the receiver position, off the top of my head, without giving it a ton of thought, I think it's a no-brainer that's the most talented position when we look ahead to
recruiting stars for sure.
Well, yeah, but even I would say, in addition to recruiting stars, the production as well. Again, that's off the top of my head. But then we have talked about this the last 2 off seasons, but it is finally Ethan Davis's chance to kind of be the star at that position. I expect a big year from Ethan Davis. I think he's capable of it, but it is an important offseason for him. And then you have one of the better backs in the SEC in Deshaun Bishop. My question is the offensive line going to take a step forward enough to help you against LSU, Texas, Alabama? Because
A&M,
right, in the more difficult games on your schedule this past season, the offensive line was not good enough. It was not what it needed to be. So we'll wrap on this. What do you make of? I believe since the last time we potted, we've certainly seen turnover in the tight end room. We've seen Tennessee add an offensive lineman, and we've seen Tennessee add a running back. What do you make of the turnover and some roster attrition at those 3 positions: running back, O-line, and then the big noteworthy one was what happened with Jack Van Dorselaer?
I'll start at running back, and that's sort of an interesting situation because they don't sign anybody in the 26 class, and then they were kind of kicking around some older quarterbacks, right? They brought running backs. They brought in Gavin Sawchuk from Florida State, who had played at Oklahoma. They brought in Jacoby Jackson, who was a junior college guy that went to Florida, and then they bring in Javen Gordon, was just a freshman at Tulane this past season, and I watched some of his clips whenever he committed, and it was a little Deshaun Bishop-esque. Just his sort of build and sort of his running style as well. And he actually had pretty good missed tackle numbers on Pro Football Focus. Not a lot of yards after contact, but had some elusiveness there. I think he ran for about 500 yards, maybe 400 yards and some touchdowns there. So I think he and Dwan Morris, who a freshman that they long have believed has got some ability, even going back to after he signed. That's why they went after him so long after he committed to USC out of was it Oakland he was at in Murfreesboro? So I think that's what you're looking at there. Again, not a whole lot of numbers at running back. So that's a position where if you get banged up a little bit, Justin Baker's still in that room too. He played a lot on special teams this season. So that's an interesting ad, given that they kind of pivoted from going for an older guy to go into a guy that was a little bit younger. Offensive line, they bring in Donovan Haslam from West Virginia, who ended the season as a starter for the Mountaineers. He was actually starting left tackle at Austin Peay 2 seasons ago, and then was playing the guard spots at West Virginia. I think he's an interior guy all the way, and I think he just gives you options there and gives you some experience. A guy that's played a lot of football more than some of the other guys they maybe looked at, and you need to rebuild your depth on the defensive line because pretty much your whole second-team offensive line went in the portal in addition to Lance Hurd. So you kind of backfilled Hurd's departure with Ori Williams from LSU, and now you sort of plug in that hole that you had in terms of your depth with Donovan Haslam. And then tight end, we had Jack Van Dorselaer as a top 10 tight end transfer in the portal, which was a little crazy if I'm being honest. Now that said, I think he was going to be his role was going to increase this season and or as a sophomore, and he was as sort of I refer to him a lot as sort of Miles Kitselman 2.0. So he was going to be able to sort of fill what Kitselman was giving you, which was a consistent, reliable, dependable run blocker who could play with some physicality, execute his job, and then go catch a few passes here and there. And so when he leaves, you kind of needed that physical presence, right? Because theoretically, you've got Ethan Davis and Deshaun Brame to go out there and run routes and catch passes. That's what they're really good at. They've worked hard for a few years now to get Davis to sort of be a little bit more well-rounded. That's going to be the challenge to Brame this offseason after he, missed some time last offseason with whatever injury it was that sort of limited him in spring ball. And then B, he finished the season basically playing slot receiver for you. So they need to develop him in the core over the next several months. And he's got to put a lot of weight when he got here. So I think physically he's getting closer where he needs to be. Now I just need to kind of teach him what to do. Then you bring in Trent Thomas, who is 6'4", 255, I think what he was listed at. Played at South Alabama. I think he has 5 career catches, something like that. But looking at his PFF stuff, he had like 400 snaps a season and about 270 of them, I think, or thereabouts, were run blocking snaps. So you know what you're getting here. You're getting a guy that's going to be you're bringing him in here and you're telling him, okay, here, just sit in the room and watch Miles Kitselman film for the next several weeks. He goes here on this call, teach him how to run block because that's what you brought him in to do. Again, not a big flashy addition. None of these guys that I think they've added since the dead period are really difference makers. Sort of, we touched on this, I think, last week, that they added a lot of your plug and play starters, your guys that you need to play a big role. Now you're plugging in guys that you need to be contributors and to sort of fill a role and fill a job. And so, I think you saw that. We keep going back to Indiana. I think we've set a record for Indiana references on this podcast, but a lot of guys in that team just, did their jobs, right? They come in and play their roles, and you need that on a football team, and you need guys that are bought into what they need to do. And so, you brought some guys in here that aren't going to be maybe top of the depth chart, top line guys, but you never know. You get a couple of guards have their ankles rolled on next season, and Donovan has them starting for you. Maybe Trent Thomas comes in from South Alabama and shows that he's a better athlete than maybe you thought. So kind of like Kitselman did. So there's a lot of different sort of, you never really know how a season is going to go, but in terms of addressing needs, you kind of get thrown a wrench there with Van Dorsey leaving because it's late in the window. And before the dead period, or, coming out of the dead period, I don't know the exact numbers, but it seems like if you just went down the position rankings on our portal rankings, a lot of guys had already picked teams. So they were kind of thrown a wrench there at the end. They had to make the best of that situation. And they get a guy that Florida was after too. So it's not like Trent Thomas was sitting there waiting for his phone to ring. He just visited Florida when Tennessee went after him, and they get him, and he sort of backfills that spot that you lost there with Van Dorsey.
You need these guys to fill out your roster, right?
Yep.
It's not just the starting 22 that you have to piece together. Ethan Davis is tight end 1. Deshaun Bishop, running back 1. We'll see if Donovan Haslam can come in and push Sam Pendleton at center.
But he gives you options there too, because you can plug him in at guard. Do you want to work Jesse Perry more at center this offseason? You have, he gives you some flexibility and the ability to sort of tinker with those interior spots this offseason.
And
sorry to cut you off.
It's all right. Lord knows I cut you off. And I believe off the top of my head, the 6th offensive lineman, right? Would you pencil him in as the 6th offensive lineman right now?
Well, I think you kind of break it down into. Well, maybe. It depends on who would go out, right? If it was David Sanders that went out, I think you're kicking Ori over to left tackle and then playing Jesse Perry at right tackle, and then is Umarov or Moy, what are those guys at?
I guess I would personally give Umarov the nod. I forgot about Sham. I apologize.
Sham would be the 6th guy, I would think. Yeah.
He would be. I would give him the nod, but you also need more than 6 linemen. Like you need 7 or 8 that you can truly rely on. So I'm really high on Jackson Moy, Wendell Moy. Jackson Moy posted on Instagram Sunday evening a farewell photo of Neyland Stadium because he was headed out of town for the final time. Wendell Moy at left guard, very high on. I'm very high on Jesse Perry. So I don't want to just go ahead and prematurely say that Donovan Haslam is your 6th or 7th offensive lineman, but maybe he does and can come in and push Sam Pendleton at center, because Sam Pendleton does need to be better in order for Tennessee to play at the level it needs to along the offensive line. Pendleton needs to take a step this offseason, and he's still somewhat of a young guy. Hopefully he can take that step. But my point is, like you've already got all of your starters in the boat, and you see this. I'm a fan of professional sports, like my Yankees, my Steelers. Like they make these signings throughout the course of the offseason. Like when Jeff Passan reports it or Adam Schefter reports it, it's like, okay, it doesn't move my needle. I don't get excited, right? When they sign this random relief pitcher, but then that random relief pitcher becomes very important once the season rolls around. Or like the one that I can think of off the top of my head is Kenneth Gainwell. We signed him from the Eagles. My Steelers did, and like I was like, okay, I like Kenneth Gainwell going back to his Memphis days and whatnot. Like, all right, that's a decent signing, but like I wasn't over the moon excited about it. And he was one of the most important Steelers on the team this year. I believe he won team MVP. So and made a phenomenal catch in Detroit. So like you see some of these commitments like the tight end from South Alabama and so on and so forth. And it's like, okay, they're coming from South Alabama. Like Tennessee's doing a good job of filling the depth, like good for them. But it is truly very important because they may not move the needle. Those acquisitions may not move the needle in the offseason, but you get in season and you remember, oh, that's why we needed to go add this guy, go add that guy. So they've done a good job of filling out their starting 22. And now you're seeing them just round the roster together as a whole. And like we mentioned earlier, now they got to go find another defensive lineman, defensive tackle to add. And so these are important signings, even if they don't seem like it in the moment.
Yeah, and as we sort of get towards the tail end of, I guess, roster construction or roster management mode, I mean, workouts are starting on Wednesday with your new strength coach. Like, you got the team here, and now it's like, okay, everyone's here. Let the chips fall how they may. Let a guy like Haslam compete. There will be some guys that are maybe sidelined for spring ball because of off-season cleanups and whatnot. That happens every year. So maybe some of those guys get first-team reps, and maybe they show something. You never know. But that's a good analogy though, because that's sort of where Tennessee's been living the last few days with these portal pickups. They picked up a few defensive backs too, right? They get Tevis Metcalf, who's TJ Metcalf's younger brother, hasn't played very much at Michigan or Arkansas, but he gives you another option there. Isaiah Harge from Colorado played receiver and cornerback out there. Maybe a little didn't do it as well as Travis Hunter, but still sort of a versatile athlete who can help your depth there. DJ Burks is I guess pretty good story, right? I mean, Maryville High School standout. That program obviously has won a lot of football games over the years. He goes to Appalachian State and was a really productive player. You bring him in to sort of fill out that safety room as well. So some of these moves too are, but they're going to 105 now. So all these spots kind of matter, right? All the walk-on days, I guess, are over. And so if you can get some of these end of the roster, bottom of the roster guys, like I said, you never know. You never know who's going to be, right. Was it, again, I hate to bring up Indiana again, but wasn't, Charlie Becker, wasn't he pretty much a special teams guy for half the season? And then he's making all the big catches in their postseason run. I mean, you just never know. So all these moves matter because, like you said, you kind of just never know how it's going to play out. Tennessee's got all these guys here. The team's back in town and off season starting. So work towards next season and see what happens.
Do you think Tennessee or Colorado won the Boo Carter trade? I guess that was a 2-for-1. That I don't know. You put it on paper and I think Tennessee may have won that trade. 2-for-1.
Well, there's 5. I'm doing some.
Are we involving Colton Hood in that deal as well?
I think you have to. Well, it's funny because I'm going to look at how all the Tennessee transfers played for their new teams this season. I wanted to wait for Jacoby Thomas and Holden Stays to figure out who was going to be the ex-Vol national champion. And Colorado had like 5 former Vols, so it's a complicated trade. There's been years involved, right? Do they get credit for Caden Salter because he went through Liberty? Like, what's the?
Well, a couple of those former Vols have already transferred again, right? Like John Slaughter and did Amari McNeil transfer? I think I'm getting him confused with Jason Jenkins at Florida State.
Yeah, he didn't yet.
Yeah, but Slaughter did, right?
Slaughter, I think, did. I don't know where he committed to. But there's been a handful of those guys that left a year ago that have already transferred again. Just how it is these days.
Yeah, which tells you what you need to know about them as football
But I guess
players.
they win the trade because they got Colton Hood, who's the best player in the trade. Don't you always want the best player in the trade?
Yes, but first, John Slaughter has since committed to Purdue, sticking with a black and gold football team. The wrong black and gold, not Pittsburgh Steelers black and gold. But I think in order to assess the trade, I think we have to keep it to the current roster. So it really would just be a 2-for-1. Boo Carter for Ryan Staub and the Colorado corner. I think that would be the 2-for-1.
Tennessee would say yes.
Yes,
as of January 20th.
Billy High would say yes to help that GM grade and approval rating stay high. But I think it has to affect your current roster because we're talking about the upcoming season of this offseason.
Either way, Tennessee would say yes.
Oh, I'll tell you right now, Tennessee won the trade.
Not on a team anymore. Yeah, right.
What Colorado go 3-9 this past season?
I think I texted Ryan Callahan that Staub was probably happy to get out of Boulder, given it seemed like that season was just such a mess.
Yeah, they might go 4-8 with Boo Carter. Oh, they might go 2-10 with Boo Carter. Boo's good for a game. It's just a matter of does he help you win a game or does he help you lose a game? But he's going to swing your record in one direction or the other. It's just a matter of whether it's going to be a win or a loss. That will certainly happen. But you mentioned workout start on Wednesday, January 21st, tomorrow morning. Owens was on a flight early this morning after he won a national championship last night, met with the team around lunch because classes started today, if I'm not mistaken. And we've got plenty of great content at GoVols 24/7 to help folks get up to date and remain up to date on Tennessee's current roster and staff structure.
Yep, we'll have more of this coming week too. Still filling out some of transfer analysis. Some of the guys we touched on this one. Won't do everybody, but some of these additions that we've talked about, I will go a little bit further in depth on. Probably won't be next week. Once make sure all the roster's fully full, but we'll do some early depth charts. I know people love that. And what else we got? What else I got planned? I have a list somewhere. I don't have it in front of me, but
the list is never evolving.
I got some ideas. So look for that on the site, right? Coming up here in the next few days as we round out what's been a crazy January. It feels like it's been 300 days of January and it's only the 20th. So there's no off season so far.
Absolutely not. But things are about to calm down, and we will certainly keep you up to date on all things Tennessee football at GoVols247.com. For Patrick Brown, I'm Ben McKee. This has been another edition of the GoVols 24/7 podcast.